How the mind is freed from physical pleasure. After this period of childhood and the full development of reason, the mind may learn on its own, or may learn by hearing Holy Scripture and the Holy Fathers, that its natural and appropriate pleasure is something altogether different. What happens then? The mind, being by nature rational and prudent and loving whatever is good, cannot suffer to see the senses of its body so enslaved to their pleasurable objects. The mind cannot continue to be a co-prisoner with the senses and a contradiction, the king becoming a slave, the ruler becoming the ruled, he who by nature is self-ruled and in authority becoming the obedient subject. The mind, finally, cannot bear to receive such harm that will gradually bring it to annihilation and to hell. It is to this end, then, that the mind undertakes its entire struggle. At first it seeks to show that it was created by God to be the ruler and the king of the body. That is to say, it seeks through the assistance of divine grace and all of its courage, all of its will, and all of its knowledge to uproot out of the senses of its body those long-standing and entrenched habits which they have acquired among physical things. And it does this in order to free them from the bitter tyranny of the death-bearing pleasures they have experienced. Moreover, the mind seeks to subdue with ease the physical things to its own will. This struggle is truly a mighty one because the mind comes to the knowledge of truth at a late point in life. For if the soul had not been overcome by anyone, our task would have been simply to keep it pure. But because it has now forged itself into a strong link with passions and tendencies, we all know how very difficult this struggle is to break this bond, to liberate the soul from the worship of matter, and to have it acquire the habit of virtue. And how is this done? How indeed are the senses liberated from physical passions, and in turn placed under the obedience of the mind? When a certain king plans to subdue easily an enemy city that is fortified by strong walls, he cuts off the food supplies to those people in the city, and thus causes them such hardship that they in time decide to surrender themselves. The mind uses the same strategy in subduing the senses. Little by little, the mind deprives every sensory faculty of its customary bodily and pleasurable passions. It no longer permits them to indulge themselves, and thus easily, and in a short period of time, brings them under its control. All the time that this method is being utilized to control the passions, the mind does not stand idle, not at all. By receiving a certain ease and freedom from bodily concerns, the mind turns to its own natural and spiritual nourishment, which is the reading of sacred scripture, the acquirement of virtues, the doing of the commandments of the Lord, the practice of prayer, the understanding of the purposes of the physical and spiritual creations, and all the other spiritual and divine thoughts and deeds which are to be found in the writings of the Holy Fathers, especially those who are called the Neptic Fathers, in the anthologies of Philokalia and Evagatinos, and St. John Climacus and St. Simeon, the new theologian, and others. As the senses attracted. Originally the mind to physical pleasures, the mind now attempts to bring the senses back to the spiritual pleasures. In addition to its own efforts to nourish itself spiritually, the mind also attempts as much as possible to bring back the senses toward the mind, so that they too may enjoy with its spiritual pleasures and thus become accustomed gradually to prefer them. This is how it happened before with the mind, when it became accustomed through the senses to prefer physical pleasures. At first, generally speaking, the body attempted through the senses and the physical pleasures to make the mind and the spirit of man into flesh. On the contrary now, the mind seeks purposely, through the enjoyment of the immaterial and spiritual realities, to uplift the body also from its physical heaviness, and in a sense to make it into spirit, as St. Maximos has witnessed in many of his writings. Here is one example. When desire is added to the sense perception, it becomes a passion of pleasure, procuring for itself a specific image. When the sense is moved by desire, it again makes the perception it receives into a passion of pleasure. When the soul is attracted against its very nature toward matter, through the body it insinuates upon itself the earthly form. Knowing this, the saints seek to move toward God through the natural tendency of the soul, while at the same time they try appropriately to familiarize the body with God through the practice of the virtues, hoping thus to beautify the body with divine outward appearances. St. Gregory the theologian, too, spoke about this important point, saying that this is the reason why the soul was joined to the body, to be for the body what God is for the soul, that is, to instruct and guide the body and to bring it home to God. The soul was joined to the body perhaps for other reasons, which only God who joined them knows, and anyone who has, through God, understood these mysteries. As far as I am able to know together with those who are with me, there are two reasons why the soul was joined to the body. One reason is that by struggling against the lower things, the soul may inherit the heavenly glory. The other reason is so that by drawing the lesser unto itself and to a degree releasing it from its material thickness, the soul may draw the body upward toward God. Thus, that which God is to the soul becomes to the body, instructing and guiding through itself its fellow servant, the material body, to become familiar with God. There is an interaction and mutual influence of the soul toward the body and vice versa, the body toward the soul, according to the metaphysicians. The attributes of each communicate with each other because of the ineffable and natural bond which unites the soul and the body, even though the exact reason for this union remains essentially unknown to all philosophers and theologians.